War and art are at conflict. War is essentially destructive and violent and deals with basically murdering as many people as you possibly can, destroying as much of the opposite forces as humanly or technologically possible nowadays. It makes the world not only a scary place, but it also changes, it devalues the whole experience of nature and culture and civilization in its most profound kind of way. It's my feeling that the only thing which sort of would maybe counter it in a world which oftentimes seems meaningless is to find some kind of meaning or give the meaningless meaning by making art out of it. I was born before the war in Holland, and when I was a little kid, I was like 2 or 3 years old, the Nazis burst into the Netherlands, and I actually vaguely remember my father took me out of bed and said the war has started, and there were like planes flying over the house in a little, I remember being in a little bedroom, it was dark. I didn't know what it meant, but I heard a roar of airplanes. And then, you know, by the time the war lasted like 5 years, there was just a massive famine. There was just nothing to eat anymore. And the Nazis behaved worse than ever and would murder people, and people would die in the streets, and there would be all kinds of upheaval. However, by that time I was 7 years old, so I actually remembered a great deal out of that period, what it was like to be starving, to be covered in lice and having nothing to eat and having fear and waves of planes flying over at night and in the daytime. And now my father had to hide because he was underage, and they would take him away to work as slave labor in Nazi Germany. And it was just sort of like an incredibly intense period. Then when I came to the United States, I realized that this country was basically, and has been ever since, in perpetual warfare, whether I agree with it or not. So I started looking at the American landscape to find things which had somehow to do with the history of conflict out here. And then I started thinking about, you know, links between then and now. What is left here about the time when I was a child? If it weren't for the Americans, I would not be sitting here talking to you. And at the same time, I also realized that out here, one of the things happened here in Portland was the building of the Liberty ships. I remember the Liberty ships because they also came to Holland after the war with food. You know, Europe had been devastated, so there was an enormous need for reconstruction. The war would have been lost too. And so these ships really were, you know, really very much part of the survival, and they built them here and said, we can build them faster than Hitler can sink them. There's a story, they built one of these ships a huge ocean-going ship, they built it in 4 days and 15 hours. They completely built an ocean-going ship. So this is incredible effort they did here. I was first interested in what happened to the ships and the struggle they had out there at sea. And then I realized that right now there was this struggle out here with the people out here. And so as I then went down to Vanport, actually what is left of it, the whole town was sort of brought into my consciousness. Because all these people have really worked on these ships and have really done an incredible effort. They worked really like 3 shifts, you know, a day, 24 hours, basically just working their butts off, making this incredible work. And then after they were done, the shipbuilding was over, and then they were out there and they were basically abandoned in a sense. And I actually moved away from the ships which happened so long ago, and became far more interested in the human element of it, of the whole idea of the refugees and the water and the cultural disconnect and the washed away houses and what actually happened there. And then once I started working on that, I started making these drawings, and these drawings, all of a sudden, once the drawings themselves I started working on, they start speaking back to me and said, this is extremely powerful. I'm 80, so I'm one of the very, very last ones who actually, for which that is not history, but a living memory. It's still, as long as you're all alive, it's still alive too. Otherwise it becomes history books and stuff. And so the community of Vanport, which lived there through that experience, also, you know, I feel connected with that in a way, because of the sort of somewhat shared kind of experience of what happened during the war and right after the war. A watercolor is the opposite of war, even if it is a watercolor reflecting upon it. It really takes like something which is graceless and violent and makes something out of it which recalls it and remembers it and recognizes that it happens, but it also transposes it into a work of art which has something about it which lifts it out of the violence of the world. And so I think that out of all the things I can imagine doing, and that's why I do it myself, the only meaningful thing you can do other than contribute to the economy, in a sense, is being an artist and make art.